Hi everyone, I'm back with another edition of the American Chess Magazine Puzzle Calendar. Let's get into the puzzles. This was the puzzle for March 27th. It was composed by Luis Gomez Palazon in the year 2021. Again, all the puzzles in this series are white to move, mate in two. If you want to try to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 4 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 4.5 out of 5. Here in this position, Black's king is definitely very awkwardly placed in the center. So the first thing considered was, well, why not just play queen d6, try play queen takes d5, checkmate. Now this idea is straightforward enough, and if Black takes the rook, then queen takes d5 is checkmate anyway. And it looks like Black doesn't really have any defense, but then the annoying thing is that Black has the option of playing knight takes f2, and now queen takes d5, then king takes e3. If queen takes f6, then king takes e3 again, and if queen b6 guarding this rook, then the problem is Black can just run the king and play king to e5. So that didn't work. I also consider queen a7 check immediately, but the problem is that Black can play king to e5, and if White promotes to a queen, then Black can simply block with pawn to d6. So the problem in this position is that, one, this bishop is liable to being taken, so this rook is weak, and two, if this rook is ever taken, if White ever tries to give a check along this diagonal to prevent the rook from being taken, then Black can simply run the king to e5. Now, one way to solve this problem would be to simply play bishop takes g1 with the idea that, well, now you can't take my bishop, so I might have ideas of giving some sort of checkmate because this rook is now defended. And it looks like it might work because if bishop takes e3, then actually here White doesn't have mate in 1. If rook takes d3, then king takes e4. So even if Black plays bishop takes e3, then White does not have mate in 1 because the knight is pinned, so knight e2 isn't even possible, but even still, there'd still be king takes e4. So bishop takes g1 doesn't work defending the bishop, so the other option is to control this e5 escape square. Knight g6 is one way to do this, threatening queen to a7 checkmate. And for example, if knight takes f2, then queen a7 is checkmate here. But the problem with this one, knight g6, is that here Black has the option of playing something like bishop takes e3 again, and if rook takes bishop takes e3 is check. So bishop takes e3 check, the king just takes back, and White doesn't have mate in 2. And so therefore we come up with the right solution. Here White should play knight takes d3. Now this is a very cool idea. If bishop takes e3 check, White plays knight f4 counter checkmate. And if Black plays anything else, for example here, then White can just play queen to d6 checkmate. If Black takes this bishop, then again, queen a7 is checkmate. Definitely a very cool idea of counter checkmate against Black's check. This was the puzzle for March 28th. It was composed by Alvidou Krasian in the year 2021. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 3 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. Here in this position, Black's king is again very weirdly placed, but the problem is that White doesn't have that many checks. For example, queen g8 check just fails to king d7, and knight c7 check, the problem is Black's rook can take. So then in this position, knight c7 looks like the more hopeful route to go in the beginning. So the way to get rid of the problem of rook takes c7 is, of course, by taking this rook by yourself. Now the problem with this one, well, first of all, this move looks very hopeful because you're threatening knight to c7, you're threatening bishop to f5, and you're threatening rook to e4. So what I mean by bishop f5 is, for example, if the queen moves off the e file somewhere, White can play bishop to f5 checkmate. And if Black doesn't move the queen, then White simply takes it. And if Black tries to guard it with something like f5, then White always has knight to c7 checkmate. So this rook takes c4 definitely looks very hopeful. However, the problem is that Black can play queen to e5, and this move is so annoying. It controls c7, it controls f5, and it gets the queen off the dangerous e4 square. Another hopeful move was bishop takes e4, threatening bishop to f5 checkmate. The idea is if the rook takes, then again White has knight to c7 checkmate. But the problem is that Black can just play rook c5 guarding this square and keeping an eye on c7, and White does not have checkmate. Therefore, I thought, well, if Black's rook can't leave the c-file, why not play rook c7? Now if rook takes, then knight takes c7 is checkmate, and White is threatening queen takes e7 checkmate. As it turns out, this is the correct answer because it's almost impossible for Black, well, it is impossible for Black to guard against this threat of queen takes e7. If knight e7, White simply takes it. And if knight to g6 guarding this pawn, then white has queen to g8 checkmate. First of all, the king cannot run to d7 anymore, and the knight cannot block on f7. This is the puzzle for March 29th. It was composed by Michael Lipton in the year 2000. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 2 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. Here in this position, well, the first thing I thought was, oh, this is the composer made a mistake. Knight g7 checkmate is mate in 1. But the problem is, of course, that this bishop is pinning the knight to the king. So since I had a hopeful mate in 1, I decided to try to make that work. One way to get rid of this pin is by simply moving the king. But the problem is, no matter where you move the king, white doesn't have mate in 2. For example, if king takes d2, then knight c4 check. If king to c2, well, first of all, that doesn't even break the pin, but also black has d3 check. And the problem with black having checks is there's no counter checkmate, and then white can't have a mate in 2 moves. If king takes d4, then rook takes d5 check. And if king to e4, again, this isn't breaking the pin, so white isn't actually threatening checkmate. The only other way to break the pin is e4, and this does happen to be the right answer. So if black does nothing, then white is threatening knight to g7 checkmate, which is impossible for black to stop. If bishop takes e8, trying to create a flight square, then d takes e8 equals queen is checkmate. And black has 2 ways to en passant, which is the most concerning response for black. If d takes e3, then queen to h8 is checkmate, because remember, this black flight square bishop is pinned, so it cannot block. And after e4, if f takes e3, white does not have queen d1 checkmate, because remember, black can block with pawn to e2. But instead, white can play, I think white can play knight to f4 checkmate, because in the starting position that wasn't possible because the bishop was guarding this pawn on f4. This is the puzzle for today, March 30th. It was composed by Ivan Starochenko in the year 2001. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 6 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. Here in this position, black's king is, as always, very weirdly placed. But the thing we notice immediately is that if we could play queen to c6, that would be really helpful. It'd be a great way to threaten checkmate easily. White has a number of ways to control the c6 square, for example, rook to c8, but the problem is that this rook was guarding this e6 pawn. Black does have to be careful though. If king takes immediately, then knight takes f4 is checkmate, and white is threatening queen to c4 checkmate. But luckily, black has this crazy resource of rook to d4. Now queen to c6, black simply takes. If rook takes d4, black simply takes, and white has no way to give mate in 1. Knight b8 is also a way to guard this c6 square, but the problem is that this knight was guarding this e5 pawn, so what black does is simply play queen takes e4. Now if queen c6, black takes, and white can't take because black will just take back. So knight b8 doesn't work either. Then I came up with this genius idea of playing c6. So the idea is to support queen to c4 checkmate, because now this queen guards this c6 square. And it looks very hopeful because the same idea of rook to d4 doesn't work because white has rook takes d4 checkmate. If black takes, then queen b5 is checkmate. But unfortunately, after c6, black can play queen takes e5. Now if rook takes, then king takes d6. And if queen to c4 again, king takes d6. This c5 pawn amazingly also had a purpose, which was to guard this pawn on d6. Therefore, we use the only useless piece, this knight, and bring it to d4. This does end up being the right answer. White is threatening queen to c6 checkmate. If king takes e4, then bishop f3 is checkmate. And if queen takes e4, importantly here, white does not play queen to c6 because then king takes d4, but white plays queen to c4 checkmate. This was definitely a difficult puzzle in terms of you had to see your opponent's refutation to all these hopeful looking moves. I hope you enjoyed these puzzles. There was definitely a bigger theme of trying to make your move work, and again, checking all your opponent's responses to make sure that you've really covered all your bases. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe, and that's all for today. Bye!